added back.
Within 40 minutes of me catching you red-handed.
There was one redaction out of
he's
over
listed as a co-conspirator.
4,700, and we invited you in. This guy has Trump derangement syndrome. He needs to get, you're a failed politician. You need to
I want you to watch the video.
Mr. Chairman, please restore his time and remind the witness of the rules here.
There is no credible information.
Before we dive into the full meltdown, I need you to see just how far this hearing spirals. Because the moment you just saw isn't a side note. It's the climax of a confrontation that had been building from the very first minute. And the tension here is real. Once Massie corners Bondi on the DOJ's document failures, the entire room shifts. She's already under pressure, he's pressing her on redactions, missing names, unexplained omissions, and she's struggling to keep control of her answers. But the moment he calls out how quickly her office scrambled to fix a mistake only after he caught them red-handed, that's where everything snaps. You can hear it in her tone, you can see it in the back and forth, and you can feel the frustration boil over. And then comes that line, the one that instantly tells you she's no longer defending policy, she's defending herself. This is why this exchange matters. Massie wasn't just challenging the DOJ's handling of Epstein-related records. He was outlining a pattern, step-by-step, missteps, redactions that made no sense, survivors' names exposed in a document that was explicitly meant to protect them, and key figures concealed until they weren't. And every time he tries to walk Bondi through those failures, her responses get sharper, faster, more defensive. She interrupts. She pushes back. She tries to redirect. But the structure of a hearing doesn't give her control. And Massie uses that to tighten the pressure.
Fully redacted. And by the way, I'm going to unredact them here. Les Wexner is in this. Now, your your deputy attorney general said, oh, well, he appears hundreds of times in the files, but he doesn't appear in this file until I forced you to release it, where he's listed as a co-conspirator, not to tax evasion, but to child sex trafficking, not to prostitution, not to money laundering, child sex trafficking. And then finally, what we have here is the third exhibit that I have is emblematic of the FD 302 release. These are the documents that we need that you're holding on to and over-redacting because they have the names of the men who are implicated. How do we know? Because the survivors gave testimony to the FBI, and it's in there. And what happens when you go to the portal at the DOJ to look at what's behind this redaction? Another redaction. So we can't even see them. And then there's some of these files you've pulled down from the website that we will never see because we can't search the redactions. So I have several questions for you. Who's responsible? Are you able to track who in your organization made this massive failure and released the victims' names? Are you able to track who it was that obscured Les Wexner's name as a co-conspirator in an FBI document? Do you have that kind of accountability?
I believe Wexner's name was listed more than 4,000 times.
Yeah, I already told you that. This is where he's listed as a co-conspirator.
Can I finish my answer? Come on, let me finish my answer. We corrected that within 40 minutes. He was already, you're acting like every...
Right out of the gate, Massie isn't warming up. He's making a statement. He's got documents in hand, blown up behind him, and he's not using them as props. He's using them as evidence. Watch how he frames it. He describes them as emblematic of a systemic failure. That's not casual language. He's building a narrative brick by brick, the kind of methodical setup that leaves no room for the witness to wiggle out later. And he starts with the most damaging detail possible. The DOJ released an email that explicitly listed names not to release. Let that sink in. This wasn't a clerical slip. This was the exact opposite of the instruction in the email. And he underscores it by pointing out that someone did edit the document. They redacted the lawyer's name, but somehow left the victims' names visible. That is the kind of inconsistency that immediately shifts the room. It creates an implication of selective redaction, and once that implication lands, Bondi is already on the defensive. You can see her trying to catch the rhythm of the exchange, but Massie isn't slowing down. He moves straight to the next exhibit, a document titled Child Sex Trafficking Co-Conspirators that's fully redacted. Normally that phrasing alone would be explosive, but he doesn't stop there. He announces he's going to unredact one of the names and drops Wexner. At that moment, the oxygen in the room changes. Bondi knows exactly how sensitive that name is, and she also knows the position she's stuck defending. And immediately, she tries to soften it. He appears thousands of times. It's no big mystery, but Massie doesn't let her pivot. He cuts in. He already knows that detail. He already anticipated that deflection. And this is where the first real power shift happens. He says, in effect, sure, he shows up elsewhere, but this file, the one that matters, only showed his name after he forced them to release it. That's the kind of contradiction that lands hard. This is where the tone starts cracking. Bondi tries to interrupt him, tries to correct him, tries to reframe. But at this point, she's reacting, not steering. And when she says, "Let me finish my answer," you can hear the frustration bleeding through. Massie hits her with her "claiming my time," the procedural hammer that signals one thing: you're not going to wriggle out with a speech. And the more she pushes, the clearer it becomes that this is not a controlled message from the DOJ. This is a defensive scramble. Then you get that moment where she complains she needs to answer because it's a political joke, and the chairman has to intervene just to get the exchange back on track. When the witness starts accusing the committee of political games in the middle of a factual dispute over document handling, that's a sign the witness is losing the frame. Massie keeps pulling her back to one point. Who is responsible? Who did this? Who redacted what? Who exposed survivors? Who hid key names? Who blocked access? Who made the decisions? And she has no clear answers. This is the turning point. Once a witness can't answer the basic accountability questions, everything after that becomes defensive spin. But now we move into the moment where the confrontation hits maximum velocity. The moment that became the teaser at the top of this video.
So I'm going to put the language of the bill up on the screen.
Chairman,
Because
may
I
I
have
give my
another
answer
question.
on that?
Here's
It's a political
the question.
joke, and I need to give my answer on that.
We'll let the Attorney General respond, and then the gentleman can move to his
Chairman,
next question.
it's my time.
Within 40 minutes, you asked me a question.
You can give
Within
me-
40 minutes, Wexner's name was added back.
Within 40 minutes
You
of me catching you red-handed.
There was one redaction out
Where
of
he's
over
listed as a
4,700,
co-conspirator.
and we invited
what?
you
Show
in.
the video.
This
Show
guy
the-
has Trump derangement syndrome. He needs to get, you're a failed politician.
Gentlemen,
You need to
I
get
want
on
you to
things
watch
that
the
matter.
video.
The chairman, please restore his time and remind the witness of the
Himself,
rules
there
here.
is
Time.
no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals.
Is that your position as well?
My position is any victim who comes forward, of course, we would love to hear from them. 1-800-CALL-FBI. Did you ask Merrick Garland that the last 4 years? Did you talk about Epstein?
I am
at
reclaiming
all
my
the
time.
last
I'm
4
glad you're
years?
asking about Merrick Garland.
You don't get to reclaim
because
time
this
when
is
you don't-
bigger
when
than
you can't-
Watergate.
when I don't answer a question the
This
way you
goes
want.
over 4 administrations. You don't have to go back to Biden. Let's go back to Obama. Let's go back to George Bush. This cover-up spans decades, and you are responsible for this portion of it.
And that's
now,
where the
I want to
most
know at
transparent-
what point did the FBI and the DOJ decide that Lex Wessner was not a co-conspirator? Because our Epstein Files Transparency Act requires you, please put it
Time
back
is
on
up.
the screen, please, to release the internal decision about whether to prosecute him or not, and it's not in the files, and it's not in the files for any of these other men.
Time of the gentleman has
Which,
expired.
may she answer?
And he's a hypocrite because he voted against the ban that we were talking about on deep fake AI porn. Only 2 people voted against it, and you were one of them, hypocrite.
The gentleman's time has expired. She didn't answer the question.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
I would,
point of
Mr.
order.
Chairman, could she answer the question?
Chairman, I was wondering,
The gentlelady's allowed, the Attorney General's allowed to respond the way she wants to respond to any member's questions, Republican, Democrat.
All right, I have unanimous consent request.
Gentleman's recognized for a UC.
All right, this is an example. I'm submitting these 302 forms that are entirely redacted, even when you go to look at them.
Without objection.
I'm submitting a witness statement that implicates Les Wexner.
Without objection.
I'm submitting an article from the New York Times that the DOJ released nude photos and
Without objection.
identifiable pictures of the victims. I'm submitting a letter from AG Bondi to Kash Patel, imploring him to quit keeping the files. When you found out.
Remember, up to now, Massie has been laying out a timeline. Errors, omissions, redactions, missing files. But when Bondi tries to defend the Wexner redaction by saying it was corrected in 40 minutes, that's where Massie sees the opening and drives straight through it. Because what he's pointing out is simple. You didn't fix it until you got caught. And the moment he says that, within 40 minutes of me catching you red-handed, that's when Bondi snaps back with what becomes the most quoted line of the hearing. This guy has Trump derangement syndrome. This is the tell. This is the moment the witness abandons procedural arguments, abandons explanations, abandons the pretense of neutrality, and swings at the questioner personally. It's a moment that shows frustration overtaking composure, and when a witness goes ad hominem inside an official hearing, that's not a sign of confidence. That's a sign the pressure is working. And Massie isn't just hit with the accusation, he brushes it off and keeps drilling in. Look at the contrast here. She's responding emotionally. He's sticking to the paperwork. That difference in tone is exactly what makes the exchange so lopsided. When one side loses their cool and the other stays focused on the documents, the audience can tell who's holding the thread. Then comes another escalation. She starts accusing him of being a failed politician. She tells him he needs to watch the video. She's no longer answering questions, she's fighting for control of the narrative, and by doing that, she signals to the entire room that she's not confident in the documentation. And Massie? He just keeps hammering. Every time she tries to pivot, he drags her back to the same unresolved question. When did the DOJ decide that Wexner was not a co-conspirator? When did that shift? Where's the documentation? Why isn't it in the files required by the Transparency Act? Bondi doesn't answer. She redirects. She talks about other cases, other administrations, other people. She tries to disperse accountability across decades and agencies. That move sounds strategic on the surface, but in context, it reads as evasion. Because Massie is not asking about the past 30 years. He's asking about her office's decisions, and she has no straight response. By this point, the tension is full voltage. She accuses him of hypocrisy on an unrelated bill. She calls him out for voting against a deepfake ban. And when a witness has to reach for something outside the topic of the hearing to go on the offensive, that's not rebuttal. That's desperation creeping in. And then you feel the momentum swing. Massie starts submitting evidence for the record. Completely redacted forms. Witness statements implicating key figures. News reports about the DOJ releasing identifiable victim photos. A letter from Bondi to another official. All of it entered with no objection. Each submission is another weight dropping onto the DOJ's position and another signal that Bondi has lost control of the room. By the time they adjourn for votes, the damage is done. The confrontation wasn't just heated, it exposed a divide between the narrative the DOJ wanted to present and the paper trail that Massie brought with him. This is why the hearing landed so heavily online. It wasn't just the shouting or the interruptions or the insults. It was the slow, escalating realization that the witness was losing the ability to answer the most basic procedural questions and compensating with personal attacks. And when that happens on camera, the power dynamic is unmistakable. What we saw today wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a breakdown in institutional credibility. And once the witness went off script, the entire exchange became a case study in what happens when oversight hits a nerve. Massie walked in with documents. Bondi walked in with talking points, and as the pressure mounted, only one of those held up. The takeaway is simple. Hearings like this aren't about volume. They're about who stays grounded in the facts. And in this case, the witness lost her footing the moment she tried to make it personal. If you want more breakdowns like this where powerful people get pressed on the record, hit subscribe and drop your take in the comments. Who do you think came out stronger in this hearing? And what was the one moment that changed the whole exchange?